Okay, so welcome to the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work workshop series. So today is week 1 of 7. So we're going to be meeting every other Friday from now into December. And I'm very excited to share more about the Gottman method. And I'm really passionate about Gottman. And I love it. I've been doing private practice for 12 years. So I've been in social work since 2004 and then started the Couple Wellness Expert, which is now the Couple Wellness Experts, plural, because I'm hiring on some associates, that I started this practice in 2012. And so during that time, I used other approaches with couples, but it was 2021 that I started to learn about Gottman, and I just became a Gottman groupie. So I am really keen on the Gottman method. So I did level 1, 2, and 3 all bang, bang, bang in a row back in from August to December 2021. And then 2022, I did the 7 Principles leadership training. So that's how I'm able to provide this workshop. And then I did the Trauma and Affairs Gottman training this past April. And then the Gottman Couples and Addictions training this past April as well. So that was also bang right in a row. And then, so now I'm working on Gottman certification. So I clearly really love the Gottman method. And I hope that this gives you some information about it as well that might inspire you as well. So the goal with this workshop is just to give, especially with week 1, just to give an overview of kind of the research behind the Gottman method, and then particularly principle 1, which we'll get to. So all this is based on his book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. So if you don't have the book already, it's a great resource, a great tool. This kind of workshop is great for couples who are pre-engaged or premarital, cohabiting, or been together for many years. It's not really for couples who are in severe relationship distress or experiencing significant emotional or physical abuse, or serious emotional or mental health issues, or active addiction to drugs or alcohol, or any kind of serious compulsive behaviors such as gambling or sexual acting out. So if there is a couple that falls under any of those categories, then seeking, the appropriate services for that, whether it be individual or couples therapy, would be a greater benefit than attending a workshop kind of like this. So this is really more psychoeducation, not a support group or anything like that. So in addition to the book, there are a few other really useful tools that are free and readily available. So for example, there is an app. It's this one with the red and the 2 hearts. So that's called the Gottman Card Deck app. So if you go to the App Store and just put in Gottman card decks, then that'll come up. And it's great because it has lots of different card decks for couples to use that, in my work with couples, I often assign as homework. And so there's the love maps. Today, we're going to be talking about the love maps. So there's a love maps card deck on there. There's an expressing needs card deck on there. There's some sex questions on there. So it has a lot of really great resources right there on a free app. And another useful tool is the Gottman podcast. So that's called Small Things Often. And so it's just very bite-sized, about 5 minutes. Each episode's about 5 minutes. And that's a nice tool as well, just for little nuggets of information to kind of inspire you in your relationship. And there's also a couples weekend retreat that I'll be hosting in March. So that'll be March 22nd to 24th. And so this 7 Principles work will be covered over the span of a whole weekend from Friday to Sunday. And you can find out more information about that and even register on the website, thecouplewellnessexperts.com. All right, so in terms of Gottman's research and how this all came about, so he's been researching couples for 40 years, and it started with the research lab in Seattle, and so there he had couples come in, and he studied them over the course of a weekend. So he kind of set it up as a B&B getaway kind of thing, but they had cameras in all the rooms. They had to provide urine samples and blood samples, and they were measuring heart rate and cortisol levels and all these things. So they did a lot of observation during that time, and so they study these couples over a period of that weekend. Over time, they studied 3,000 couples, and they did longevity studies. So they followed these couples 6 years later. So this is the newlywed study that he had done many years ago. And then 6 years later, he had them come back and determine whether they were still together, and if they were still together, then what the quality of the relationship was like, and if they were not together, more further details about that. If they were still together, what if they were thriving in their relationship. So he found the difference between he found several differences between what he calls the masters of relationships and the disasters of relationships. So with the masters, they if there was some kind of conflict, one of the things that they were really great at is they were able to do repairs quite soon after. With the disasters of the relationship, those that didn't last, he found that there were 4 predictors of separation and divorce. So those he refers to as the 4 horsemen. So that's criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So I'll get to that in a moment. So all this to say, the Gottman method is based on many years of research, lots and lots of data, 40 years of research, and studying over 3,000 couples. So I love that it's based so strongly in the research, and that's how it all started. So the methods all came out of the research. They based it on that. So in terms of the 7 principles, this is just a very brief overview, so you can see what's all involved with the 7 principles. So today we're going to focus on the love maps, and then next time, 2 weeks from now, we'll focus on the nurture, fondness, and admiration. So that's just to give you a little overview. And then he was able to see what the certain predictors were of divorce. So the first sign of divorce was the harsh startup. So that is coming into a conversation with that criticism, with that tone, with the harshness, maybe even with contempt, with a put down or blaming kind of attitude. And so he was able to develop antidotes, which I'll get to in a moment, but antidotes to all these different horsemen. So the first predictor is that harsh startup. So the answer to that is to have a softened startup, to begin a conversation with an I statement. So in Gottman's research, how the first 3 minutes of a conversation goes predicts not only how the rest of that conversation will go, but also the longevity of the relationship. And then the second sign is the presence of those four horsemen, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. The third sign is flooding. So flooding is if your heart rate is over 100 beats per minute. And so if you're in that state, then your amygdala is hijacked, your prefrontal cortex is shut down, and you're in that fight, flight, freeze mode. So if you're in that flooded state, when you're in a disagreement with your partner, then there's really no point in continuing that conversation, because you're not going to be able to find some resolution. You're not using your logical brain. You're just flooded with emotion. So it's important in that state of mind to take that time out, take some time to ground again and to regroup, and to bring the heart rate back down to at least 85, which Gottman recommends usually takes between 20 minutes. It usually takes at least 20 minutes. So he recommends for couples to resume the conversation anywhere between 20 minutes and 24 hours, but not longer than 24 hours. The fourth sign of divorce, or predictor of divorce, is the body language. So this is key in terms of especially contempt. Contempt was the strongest predictor of divorce among the four horsemen. So a nonverbal cue for that might be, for example, eye rolling or crossing of the arms, disengagement in that kind of way. So like especially eye rolling was a big sign of contempt. And then the fifth sign was failed repair attempts. So like I said before, there was a difference between the masters and disasters. So the masters, one of the things that they did really well is repair. So repair can be verbal or nonverbal. It can be an apology. It can be a physical touch, kind of touching on the arm or giving a hug after you've kind of talked things through, or once you've had kind of a difficult conversation, kind of ending with grace in that way, hugging it out, or even just acknowledging, oh yeah, you know what, you made a really good point there. So kind of seeing the other person's point of view. So all these are different kinds of ways to repair. And then the sixth sign is holding on to bad memories or rewriting the past. So he refers to that as negative sentiment override. When you see different events of the relationship in a negative light, and that can impact how you view things currently. So something that your partner might have said that maybe they intended it to be quite neutral or maybe even positive, if you have this negative sentiment override, then that comment can be construed or perceived as negative as well. So these are all the predictors of divorce. And so just to get into a little bit more with the horsemen. So again, the four horsemen that he found, this is probably the bigger takeaway of Gottman's research, is these horsemen. So the criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling. So on the right here, you'll see all the antidotes to these. So the antidote to the criticism is having that gentle startup, starting with the I statement, leading with that feeling word. And then for defensiveness, it's taking responsibility, taking ownership for your role and what might have happened. And also, trying to see from the other person's perspective where they might have a point, where, maybe you don't agree with everything they're saying, but maybe they do have a point about some pieces that you can reflect for yourself. Okay, yeah, you know what? I did do that, or I do own that. So taking some ownership or responsibility. And then contempt, again, that's the strongest predictor of the divorce or separation. The answer to that is being able to describe your own feelings and what you need, being able to really let the partner know what you need in a gentle way, and also creating that culture of appreciation in the relationship. So trying your best to recognize the positive qualities of the other person, and not only recognize those, but verbalize those as well. So that creates that positivity, and then coming with it, with that gentleness and that softer tone as well. And then the stonewalling, the answer to that, like I mentioned before, is the self-soothing. So when someone is stonewalled, they are disengaged in the conversation. Their wall is up, hence the term. But physiologically, they can be quite flooded. So it might appear to the partner that they don't care, they're not listening, they're not even paying attention during this conversation. But in actuality, if you look at their physiology, they're very flooded and they're in fight, flight, freeze mode, and they're just kind of trying to survive in that moment, just trying to get through that conversation that's really difficult for them. So the answer to that is being able to take that time out, do some self-soothing, regulate yourself, and then return to the conversation. And that's the key part, is returning to the conversation, so you can find that resolution. Okay, so that's all kind of, the preface to the 7 principles, kind of what it's all, where it all came from, and what the backing of it is. So now we're going to jump into the first principle, which is enhancing love maps. So love maps is one of the 3 areas in the, I know I don't have a slide of that, but Gottman has a sound relationship house that identifies all the different aspects of a relationship, the trust and the commitment and the goals together and conflict management and all these different areas. And so the bottom 3 layers of that house form the friendship foundation. And so the love maps is one of those foundational aspects of the friendship. So that basically just means how well the couple know each other. So, and that can change over time. So, when a couple first gets together, it's quite exciting. They love spending all kinds of time together and getting to know each other. And so their love maps might be quite strong in the beginning. And then over time, people evolve, they change, and their preferences, their likes, their dislikes, their way of being might evolve and change over time. So it's important to always be updating the love maps. And I know for John and Julie Gottman, they go away every year to the same place and they go canoeing, and they every year renew their love maps. So they ask each other all these love map questions. So which I'll show you in a moment. So these are the different kind of exercises for love maps. So if you do have the book, then you can go to page 56, and that has a love map questionnaire. And then on page 58, there's the actual love map game. That's the one I use with my clients all the time. And then there's other ways to get to know each other on that deeper level, such as open-ended questions, which actually is included in the in the card deck app as well. And in the book, it's page 60 there. And then there's another one that's really great for love maps. That's called Who Am I questions. So I can kind of give you just a sample of that too, just so that you know what that all involves. So page 62. Okay. So just to give an example of open-ended questions, so going back to that. So open-ended questions might be something like, how are you feeling about your job these days? What qualities do you value most highly in friends right now? Do you feel like certain things are missing from your life? What would they be? So those are examples of open-ended questions. Open-ended is questions that you can't answer with a yes or a no. And then the who am I questions, that has different categories like my triumphs and strivings, injuries and healing, the emotional world, mission and legacy, and who I want to become. So for example, I'll just throw some of the questions from here. So under who I want to become, a question might be, what would you like to change about yourself? What would you most like to change about yourself? And then under the emotional world, the question might be, during your childhood, did your family have to cope with a particular emotional problem, such as aggression between parents, a depressed parent, or someone emotionally wounded one? What implications does this have for your marriage and your other close relationships? So you can see it really dives deep in terms of getting to know your partner all over again, and on a deeper level. So so the love maps game, how it works, I'll show you kind of the instructions here. So how it works is they have a list of different questions. There's 60 different questions. So so with this game, the first you read and you just go through all the questions. So, but you alternate back and forth. So you'd read the first question and then you would answer it as you think your partner would respond. And then they can say, yeah, that's exactly right. That's how I would have answered that for myself. So then if you are keeping a score, you can collect a point for that. If you get it right, you get a point. And then if it's not correct, then you can just very gently correct the response and just let the partner know, well, you know, it's a good try, but this is how I would actually respond to that. And then you go to the next question, alternate. So then the other person gets a turn to answer the question. And then you just keep going all the way through. And if there's a question on here that may be a little bit uncomfortable or doesn't feel right, or is a bit sensitive for that particular moment, that's okay. Just skip it. So there is, as you go through the love map game, and by the way, if it's too loaded to keep score, you don't have to keep score. You can just do it for fun without keeping score. But yeah, as you go through the game, there is kind of a right and wrong way to do it in terms of, you know, still being mindful of not letting the four horsemen enter into the picture. So so I'll give an example. Like one of the questions is, name one of my hobbies. Okay, so let's say I'm doing it with my partner, and then my partner is trying to guess what my hobby is, and they're saying, okay, you know what, yeah, I know the answer to this one. Your hobby is watching TV. This, I don't even watch TV, but I'm just throwing this out as an example. I don't really watch a lot of TV. So they might guess, okay, your hobby is watching TV. You're in front of the TV all night long. You must really love TV, and that really, that's all you do. So you can see that it's kind of loaded, right? It's kind of like presenting the answer in a critical way of like basically the underlying message is judgment around the person watching too much TV. So so instead of doing that, doing it in a loving way and keeping the four horsemen out of the picture, by, you know, maybe they think that that if it's me, maybe they think my hobby really is TV, but they can say it in a much gentler, kinder way, right? Like they might say something instead like, well, you know, I'm not sure what other hobbies you have, but I do notice that you do enjoy TV. So I wonder if one of your hobbies might be TV. And so you can see that's like not as judgmental, not as blaming, not as critical. So then I'm not going to get defensive, right? So that's one of the cycles that can happen in a relationship, that criticism defense kind of cycle. So so if they're guessing that, I might, if it's wrong, then I would say, You know what? That's a really good guess. Yeah, you know what? I do find that I've been watching more TV lately. You're right about that. But what I would say in terms of an actual hobby is that I really like being able to do activities together. I really like, walking, going for walks together or runs together. Like you remember when we used to go running together like pretty regularly? Like I kind of miss that. I kind of miss that together time with you, and I wish we could do that again. So then that launches into a whole conversation about, oh, maybe we should take up running again together. Maybe next year we'll do that marathon we've been meaning to do. So it kind of launches into more in-depth and meaningful conversation as opposed to getting into a criticism defense kind of cycle. So it deepens the knowledge of each other. So that's how the love map game works. So it's a really nice way to be able to connect with each other and get to know each other all over again. And then so next time we meet, we'll be going over the second principle of Gottman's principles for making marriage work, and that is nurturing fondness and admiration. So I look forward to going over that principle together. Okay, so do you have any questions? I know that was kind of like a barrage of information. Anything you want to clarify?
I don't think right off the bat, no. I think it's very interesting to learn more about this, and just kind of like techniques to implement in relationships. I think I really like the idea that there's even an app that can be used.
Mhm.
So if you're not a big reader, and I know a lot of couples maybe are not, and like the
Mhm.
card deck sounds very interesting and almost like a playful way to kind of add some fun in the relationship while still working on the actual relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's handy too, right? Because you can have it, you have your phone with you usually all the time. And so even if you're on a road trip or like waiting in line at the grocery store, you can kind of pull the app out and just ask each other some questions here and there. So yeah, it's a handy tool for sure. Yeah, good.
I kind of do have I guess a question just out of my
Mhm.
own curiosity. Where do you find, like, if you're using these principles in therapy with couples, where do you find that couples do often struggle the most?
Like
That might
which,
be a
uh,
loaded question.
yeah,
Yeah,
which
which
seven
area do you
principle?
find? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So if you look at, it's a good question. So if you look at the seven principles, usually what I see when I look at the sound relationship house, is usually always it's red. So red means it's an area of growth. So the conflict management area is usually always red.
Mhm.
Otherwise they probably wouldn't be seeing me, right? If they were able to manage conflict successfully. So that involves, the overcoming the gridlock and figuring out the solvable problems. So, we'll get to that at a later workshop, but basically, Gottman's research, another big takeaway of his research was that 69% of problems that couples face are actually gridlock issues. So they're just perpetual problems that are not going away. They just are the same issues over and over again. And so that could be, it could come down to personality differences or maybe cultural differences or religious differences or political differences. But those like deep-seated, deep-rooted areas that are not easily changeable. And then that leads to, or even cleanliness, like, some people are just more clean than other people. And so then that creates issues in the relationship. And so if there are those perpetual issues, it's not easy to work through. But there are some nice tools with the Gottman method that address it and help the couples to be able to process it more so they can try to see the other person's perspective a little bit better and maybe even come up with a temporary compromise, if anything. And then so the other 31% are solvable problems. And those are much, much more, accessible and easy to figure out. So even
Mhm.
just figuring out a compromise on that, or coming up with a decision together, being able to accept the other person's influence as you're making those decisions together, that helps a lot. So yeah, so it's probably
Interesting.
the bigger like presenting issue in couples work.
Right. And just out of curiosity, is like one of the goals of, I guess, Gottman's method in therapy, would it be to kind of get couples to avoid those disasters of relationship and getting them more into masters of relationship, getting them into good conflict and repair, that sort of thing?
Yeah, giving them the tools, right? So that they can be able to navigate all these things. And that's why
Mhm.
I love doing couples work, because a lot of it is tools and strategies that we can learn, that we can apply in our day-to-day lives, that we don't necessarily learn from our parents through modeling. We don't necessarily learn at school. So
Right.
like, where are we supposed to learn this stuff, right? So it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to have these tangible techniques and strategies to be able to apply it in our lives,
Sure.
be able to just enrich our relationships. So I think it's really
Mhm.
valuable. Yeah. Good
Awesome. I
questions. Yeah, love it. Okay. Anything else?
think that's it for me.
Okay, amazing. Good. So thank you so much